Cue music? Yes? It depends on who it is. No, yeah. I'm sorry for that.
Good afternoon and welcome back, guys, to A Conversation With, starring your host, Isabella Santini. Today, I am joined with Miss Carey, our APUSH teacher at High Tech High School. Miss Carey, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. My goodness. I am so happy to have you here today to talk just about the history department and the curriculum and challenges and just like about our students here at High Tech and everything. So I am very excited. Would you like to introduce yourself, how long you've been teaching, everything?
I haven't been teaching long, and my teaching years are all here at High Tech. So This is year 3 for me. Before that, I was doing a lot of figuring what I was going to do. So initially, I wanted to go and be a lawyer. I went to law school at Rutgers and did that for a while. And eventually, I kind of found myself falling into or desiring to study history more, which was my undergrad degree. And then I went for a PhD in history at Brandeis. And I loved grad school. So it's like fully nerding out. You just sitting around people that are passionate about history and talking about a book you read. But while I was there, I had the opportunity to teach my own classes. And once I was teaching my own classes, I was like, I think I actually like this more than the academic part, which is ultimately like when you're just studying primary source material and coming up with your own research and coming up with your own ideas, which I like, but it's very isolating. So I found myself liking teaching. Both of my brothers teach at County Prep. And so it kind of was a pull into the district and let me see if this works out, see if I like it. And I ended up really liking it. So I'm really happy here. And I've really enjoyed everything really about the last 3 years.
That's amazing. I have had Miss Carey for 2 years now. She was my sophomore year history teacher, and then I ended up applying for her APUSH class for my junior year, and I had such a lovely time in that class, not only with my friends, but her as a teacher. She's really an incredible teacher, so I was so happy to have you for APUSH. But I do want to ask, your approach to teaching, how did you, when coming into teaching from learning in law school and everything like that, I'm sure it was much more stern and much more of a rigorous process in it.
Definitely more rigorous, but I think that one of the things that's really different is that when you're in college, they're not necessarily interested in how they teach you or in the university setting. And so it can be a lot lecture and trying to figure out how to incorporate that, because it is still in some ways, as you see, like it's my style, I do like to lecture, but how can you lecture where hopefully a group of high school students isn't completely shutting it down or really bored by it. But at the same time, I think that what is so different is this connection that you are able to develop, which is because you're seeing the same faces every single day. So in those other settings, it's a lot more separate. And in this case, you're seeing the same people, you're getting to talk to and get to know these students on an individual level. So you see what works with some students and what works without them, what works well with some and not well with others. And I think that it's helpful, I realized, is to connect as best as you can with the individual student, because I think that they want to do better if they feel like the teacher is invested. But again, I'm still somewhat new at this.
No, I completely understand. I think that's a great way to approach your teaching. I think a lot of the time when you have teachers who do want to follow the curriculum and make sure everything's completed by the end of the year and everything is done, I think in doing so can be very beneficial, of course, for the students and their progress through high school. But I also find that a lot of students, even sometimes including myself, really just want to make it through the subject and get it over with, and that's done. And then all the information that you spent so much time and you worked so hard completing, like all your assignments and everything throughout the year, just gets swept under the rug, and you find yourself thinking, like, really, what was the point? And it's just unnecessary time wasted, but it shouldn't be, unfortunately, because it shouldn't be, because even history, at least I understand students will like certain subjects better than others. I have always been the more English and history oriented student. And so learning history, I was always kind of seeking that teacher who really like dive deep into a subject to the point where not only is my interest piqued, but I also understand through and through, like, okay, how did this happen? When did it happen? And why is it so significant to our world today? And learning from you, I was able to kind of put those pieces together, and I realized that I was actually learning for the first time, like, history wise, and learning different events, like, and how they happen, and also how they originated, and then how that turned into, like, how our world has now, like, what it is now, basically, from our past and where we originated. I think in my past few years, although I've loved my history teachers a lot of time, I don't think I've really taken a moment to grasp onto what I've been learning.
I mean, this is very nice. I get to show up here and just get compliments, but
please, of course, you deserve it though. You do.
I would say that, like, I genuinely love this subject. I think that probably it's true of my colleagues too in all other subjects, where you might be drawn to a subject because of curiosity, but for me in particular, I was looking for answers. And answers can come in many files. Maybe people are looking for answers in biology is where they go, and psychology is where they go. But for me with history, I kept looking for the answers that weren't there in my own history classes, especially in high school. I kept taking classes looking for something that would make it all make more sense for me. So knowing that on my own interest in history was built from a deep curiosity and making the world make sense around me much better. And I also think it's a pathway of human connection and understanding how we are the way we are, why we live the way we do. That's not going to resonate with every student, but I do think what is going to resonate with my students at the very least is understanding that I care about the subject. And I think it's really meaningful what you do say, because my hope is that at least there's something in there that can make people understand ultimately that they're not just memorizing a bunch of things, but that they're hearing stories about individual people that lived and made decisions, and very ordinary and also extraordinary things were happening. And especially in APUSH this year, there's that two things going on where I really want you to be prepared for a test, but I also don't want us to forget what we're doing. And it also gives us an opportunity to see what people in the field are saying. You get to learn what historians say, but you also get to see that primary source work. And when you touching in your hand and seeing the words that people shared 200, 300 years ago, sometimes it can feel really real. And it's truth. You know, at the end of the year, end of the week, end of the quarter, whatever it is, if some people are just skating by and not all of these lessons are resonating with every single person the way that I would hope, I'm still happy if they walk away from my history class feeling that they have a deeper understanding of American history than they did before, or deeper appreciation. Maybe there's something that they talk about at the dinner table with their families one time or with their friends, or just something that sticks with them. Or maybe they take a history class somewhere down the line that even further dives into something that stands out to them. And it doesn't have to be the things that I love in history. It can be something that stands out to them even more, something that connects to their individual story or answers a question for them or anything else. So I think that people could find themselves in history. At least I did. Or maybe they find themselves in another subject, but I love history. So I'm just hoping that if my students could take like a percentage of that and enjoy a history class, actually more than I did in high school. I don't want to shout out to my own high school history teachers.
Shout out.
But I never would have expected, if I told myself at your age that you're going to be teaching history in high school, absolutely would have shocked me.
I don't blame you. Oh, please. But no, I'm happy that we get to talk about it, because even I found myself like sometimes leaving your class, and then even before I would walk out, I would have certain questions that it was all hitting me at once as you were actively giving your lecture and teaching, and being able to talk to you about it, and then leaving class and talking to my friends about it and being like, oh my goodness, this realization of this is why our world is what it is now, and these are the parties, and just everything, it all hit me. And I was really, it was a day before the exam specifically. I came
all
to
the pieces started to come together.
When I was studying with Miss Carey and two of my other friends, we left the class and we were really just in shock. Not just so, I don't mean for it to sound so nerdy, but genuinely we left and we were like, wow, like this is why our world is how it is. And I've always had certain questions that to me just seemed not necessarily silly, but just things that I didn't think were worth bringing up in a conversation with how the parties developed into what they are today, how our political views and values, how each person kind of developed into what they stand by, or people still have questions, or there's middle parties who don't exactly associate it. Like, how did that all start? In learning that in your class, I was really just, I was in shock. It was astounding to even hear about it, really.
Especially something that like really impacts our decision making as deeply as party alignment.
Absolutely.
And for us, maybe not have an answer to that question of like, how do we even get here?
Mm-hmm.
And why do people see themselves so deeply in one party, or they believe that party is so representative of them?
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you get those answers. And I have to credit you because you and your friends, you have a friend group that you're in my class with. And you did come into the learning lab together.
Yes, we
and so,
did.
you know, because it can go one way or another. You can have your friends in your class and it could really distract you from being able to do well in the class. But I do think ultimately you guys were,
we all
for the
work
most
together.
part, a good influence on one another, I would
Absolutely.
say, right?
We have one of them actually in the back right now, so I'm just
Yeah.
smiling at her, Miss Sophia.
I mean, I'm shouting out
But
the whole
there's
group.
yeah. But no, I think even having my friends in the class, like of course we get distracted, we laugh and everything, but at the end of the day, we were all able to, through studying cahoots and different things like that, we all kind of came together and were able to help one another because some of us grasped on to different subjects more than others, so we were all able to talk about it and really connect the pieces, and we were just like, wow, like this is why the world is how it is, and this is like what we've been missing from a piece of material like a couple months ago. Oh, you knew about it all this time, and now I'm just finding out about it. Like, it was just nice to have them. Sorry, I'm going over the tangent.
No, you should because it's a good, curious, thoughtful group of friends. So I think that's
absolutely.
Absolutely. Shout out to all of you.
Shout out to
Katya,
all of them.
Sasha too, because Sasha asks always great questions.
Oh my goodness, Sasha! I know, I love her. She's
As
so
a teacher,
driven.
you're just like desperate for that. You know, when someone asks you questions.
Absolutely.
Like,
Shout out to Katya, Sophia, and Sasha.
Yes, exactly.
My girls. Speaking of the political parties and everything like that, I do want to kind of center the conversation into something a little sensitive. So I completely understand if you kind of want to go off
I'll
topic.
figure out a way around it.
I appreciate that. So it's not anything too crazy, but I would love to go into conversation with you about it. With kind of the state of where we are in the world, especially with this passing year of my junior year being an election year, and with the results and with so much happening in the news and stories and everything, and a bunch of information just kind of like collided with one another. I wanted to ask, being a teacher kind of not only in this year, but in this decade, how overcoming different obstacles in your way when it comes to the restrictions being placed or things that you may come across that feel as though you may have to center yourself away from out of not necessarily the respect of other people, but also just to make sure, I don't know, I'm kind of getting off a tangent, but what I mean is, how do you approach as a teacher and also as a human being, just like
the moment that we're in.
And also just just seeing how you kind of like choose what you want to teach about in a way where you don't want to seem that you may be stepping out of bounds, but also as a history teacher. Just in general.
I think that it's a difficult thing because I feel that I don't want to do anything in the room that makes me feel like anyone in the room doesn't matter to me as much as someone else. And maybe they don't want to, it's a difficult thing. You don't want to come across like partisan because it's my responsibility to not be overly so in the classroom, partially because I think that you want to make sure that people are not shutting down and saying, okay, well, Miss Carey has these beliefs, so that she might think this of me, or I don't want to listen. However, at the same time, I think that it is really important as a history teacher to rise to the moment as well. And it can be a very tricky balance there. I can't sit by and be the source for my students to understand the American system, the American government, checks and balances, presidencies, all of these things have this responsibility, I think, to the students in the room to also meet the moment and say something essential is happening. But sometimes the way to do that is to try to see that in the history as well. Try to let them see it in the precedent, or to let them see it in what has happened before. Let them understand the moment in terms of how it's different. Let them understand the moment in terms of the impact on others. And I think that some of the things that it can be a very tricky balance because, again, I don't want to be in a position here where I'm controversial, but I also want to be a history teacher where they can ask essential questions too and get a real answer from. The election, every election, but this election has real potential impacts on families, on marginalized people, on people that are potentially in harm's way, whether through immigration, whether they're queer people. And I don't want also to be someone that's so afraid of controversy that I cannot look at my students that do feel essential fear for their rights in the future and not be able to be someone that addresses that. At the same time, if I'm doing my job in the classroom, and I think that I can continue to try to do this job, is that I hope that the students can understand and value the things in this country that are important and understand when maybe some of these things are being destabilized. And it doesn't always have to be so overt, me being critical or anything like that. It doesn't have to be me trying to sit there and talk about or push my students politically, but for them to understand that thinking politically is really an important thing for all of them to do, and not just think about it as something that has nothing to do with them, but also has real impact on lives. I do not know how much I can influence students to have empathy for the other. And I say the other because the other could be so many types of people, but it's really important to me that when people are studying history, that they are thinking about the other and they are empathizing with people, because I think so many times throughout history when the worst moments have happened, it's when human beings have forgotten that other human beings are human. When they've figured out some way to dehumanize the other, we've really gotten into situations that are, at its worst. So I don't always know if I know how to handle that, but I do try my best to balance all of these things. But it is something that goes through my head quite a lot because I empathize with you all in your age range, because you're constantly living through really major political moments, and it's not easy to think about at 17 years old.
Yeah. And even I think I honestly applaud you as a teacher, because even being not only your student, but just having you as a teacher in this school, I think coming to our classroom each day and having the questions we do, we just feel as though we are very liberated in a sense that we're very lucky to be able to attend a school like this with teachers similar to you, or teachers like you, who provide us with an opportunity and provide us with a space to ask any kind of question we have and have a conversation about it where no one feels attacked, no one feels targeted, but you're able to just be open with one another about, here are the facts, but here is also kind of how I feel and I am empathetic towards these people. But It doesn't necessarily come down to you're wrong and this is why you're wrong. It's let's have a conversation about it, but also let's keep these things in mind, because you may have been misinformed about certain things or whatever it may be. Just keeping the information just credible is, I think, so important, especially in history.
It is important, yeah.
A lot of the time, from at least what I've seen and what I've heard and people I've encountered, I feel as though a lot of credible information and a lot of documents and a lot of things over the past couple of years, anything it may be that has centered our government, that has created our history to what it is today, has been swept away by people pushing propaganda and people pushing misinformation, especially like podcasts and whatever it may be.
That's true.
But I think it's incredibly important to keep that conversation open of, no, here are actually credible sources of where you can find your information, because it seems as though the opinion or whatever you may believe in or may be striving for is just derived from hate, and it's just derived from something so far out of what I believe. I mean, personally, our world was created to be, our beliefs were meant to become, and the people we were meant to be.
I think that we are in a battle over truth, and there should never be a battle over truth. We should all embrace objectivity. We should all embrace truth and journalism and factual information. And then what you do with that actual factual information, that's really up to you to make those determinations. But it shouldn't be something that we're fighting so hard to find something that's truthful. We shouldn't have to be filtered through someone that has a podcast to tell us how to think about things, often, untruthful information. Yeah.
I understand completely. I do want to ask you one more question before we wrap up. Unfortunately, I want to keep this conversation going, but Miss Carey does have a class. But
I'd come back.
I appreciate that. But I do want to ask you, have you ever encountered maybe students with differing opinions or parents with different opinions that have given you kind of a hard time, and you've had to maybe listen to them and kind of like center their thinking into, okay, I am a teacher at the end of the day, and this is my job, this is my responsibility to inform, to educate in a way?
Yeah. Not too many experiences, honestly, but I think that's one of the benefits of like trying to have that personal connection with the students, so that they can, at least if think of the students trust you, then maybe the parents might trust you more. But when the thing that I've encountered before is when I've tried to, and it happened to me at Brandeis, and it also happened to me here my first year, where I tried to teach some history of basically like before we would have a word for trans individuals, I was teaching history of queer individuals in the past, and there was some pushback from a parent on this. And I thought that this is information that I have that is pretty unique to this space because I've studied a lot of history of marginalized people, particularly queer people. And I just wanted it, just giving a parent a space to say what they have to say, but being able to articulate the rationale for why. I think that it helps people to understand contextually that people that, for example, queer people didn't just appear out of nowhere in the last 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. And that was the purpose of teaching a lesson on that. I think it's really important for people to understand that context, that something could have existed for a very long time before a major society was willing to recognize them. And so it worked out fine. I think that it is always helpful if you have people behind you that understand your point, and also you give someone a space to say what they have to say.
Absolutely.
And if you come to them and can articulate your exact reasons for why you think this is an important lesson, it might work out. But to be continued, because you just never know what kind of things are going to be pushed back on over the next few years. With the political discussion, there's a lot of things that can be pushed back on, conversations about racial slavery, conversations about things that we take for granted.
Absolutely.
And I think it's really important that history teachers and everyone else that stands up and says, I still need to teach this because my students deserve to know it.
Absolutely. You read my mind. I was just going to say, I feel as though a lot of the time in conversation will come a lot of pushback from really any side is just the fact that these conversations are being brought up now a lot of the time regarding queer people and trans people, and people are often misinformed about the fact that they think it's being brought up because it's a political discussion, because this is right and this is wrong and nobody should be able to do this and people should be, whatever it may be. But people don't understand that just because it is a prevalent topic in conversation today, that doesn't mean that it wasn't something that was around hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago. They think that they're turning people's lives and people's identities into such a topic of just political debate, when at the end of the day, this is where we originated from. These are our origins, these are our roots. And to try and just erase history, to me, is despicable. It's diabolical. It's insane to me.
You and me both.
Yeah. No, but Miss Carey, it was so nice speaking to you today. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I am so happy to have you. I've been wanting to interview you for a very long time, so I'm happy to join us. Yeah. I'm so sorry Mr. Nocum could not make it, but special shout out to him. He's also a history teacher at High Tech, so hopefully we can get him on the show soon. But anyway, thank you guys so much for joining today. Thank you for watching, and thank you so much to our panel. I am Isabella Santini, and this is A Conversation with show on WHIT Podcasting. Thank you guys.
Thank you for having me.
Just hit every corner, Sophia.